Happy New Year and good morning. Welcome back to the morning briefing. It's Thursday, January 6, 2022, our first episode of 2022, but it's episode 160 altogether. I'm Phil Brandt. With me, as always, is co-host Bert Garland, shareholder with Ogletree Deacons. Good morning, Bert. How you doing this year?
I'm doing well. Happy New Year to you, Phil. I just, when you said January 6, 2022, it just dawned on me. We are now in our third calendar year of broadcasting. We did most of 2020, we did all of 2021, and now we're rolled over into 2022. So who would have ever imagined that way back when, in March of 2020, when we started this, that we'd still be here in January talking about all things COVID.
I never, ever would have guessed it would. We'd still be talking about COVID today and that it would be dominating every headlines. I mean, yep. Just think about some of the headlines that we're currently dealing with right now. And of course, obviously, the Omicron COVID surge is, the number one topic, but we've had blizzards and fires, tornadoes, and airlines shutting down due to, weather and staffing issues related to COVID, the filibuster debate, retailers closing stores with, lack of labor, baseball's on a lockout, 44.5 million people quit their jobs in November. So the great resignation continues to go. And of course, the beloved Betty White has left us for a better place. So, I mean, just absolutely so much going on, but COVID still dominates the topic. It's still the number one thing that we get questions on. And, you just can't ignore what's happening. So why don't we just talk about some of those things, Bert? Let's go. We got three things to chat about with lots of questions to address. The new CDC guidelines, isolation and quarantine have been released. Supreme Court and lower courts and the vaccine mandate. Would love to get an update from you and what is going on there. And our St. Louis County is at it again with mask mandates and debates and lawsuits centered around that. And people are asking, what should I do? All right, Bert, where do you start?
Well, let's tackle the new thing on isolation and quarantine. The CDC on January 4th updated its guidelines. Interestingly, to me, you've sort of got the CDC moving in a little bit of a different direction than you've got a lot of the local and state governments moving these days, because the local and state governments are, of course, returning to the idea of more masking and the idea of more isolation because of the surge of Omicron. But yet the CDC has updated its guidance and basically said that people with COVID-19 should isolate for 5 days.
That's a big
and then if they're asymptomatic or their symptoms are resolved without a fever for 24 hours, without fever reducing medication, that they can be around others so long as they're wearing a mask for an additional 5 days. So that is a big change that the CDC has come out with, and again, just seems somewhat counterintuitive to what the states and the local governments are doing. I don't know if anybody had the opportunity to see President Biden over the holidays, but he did make an announcement.
I sent him an invitation. He didn't show up to dinner.
Yeah, well, when I say see him, I meant on TV, Phil. I mean, I know you're close with him, but I'm surprised.
Remember, part of the program is entertainment, Bert, right? This is the best we can do right here.
Didn't realize that he declined your dinner invitation, but he did speak over the holidays, and one of the things he said that was really interesting, despite a lot of the campaign rhetoric about getting COVID-19 under control, is he flat out said that there is not going to be a federal solution to COVID-19, that this is something that's going to have to be done more on a state by state basis. So that's quite a turnaround from.
That's a huge change. I mean, once you drop the OSHA guideline out there and defending that and still pushing forward with it. I mean, to me, that is part of the federal solution.
Yeah.
So that's a huge change in the voice and tone coming out of Washington.
Yeah, completely. And his press secretary did back off of that a little bit, but that was the statement that he made over the holidays. And so I think you see that with the CDC sort of relaxing their light of the Omicron surge, that does sort of give a little indication that the federal government is trying to loosen the reins a little bit. And they did say that with the CDC's guidance does not supersede state or local requirements, and that people still have to follow those.
Right. Yeah. And I think employers that I'm talking to right now are trying to catch up with the 5 days, right? And understand that.
Well, and not only that, the CDC went even further and said that people who have received their booster shots do not need to quarantine following exposure, but should wear a mask for 10 days after exposure.
Right.
But for all of those exposed, the best practice would include a COVID-19 test at day 5 after exposure. If there are symptoms, the individual should quarantine until a negative test confirms they are not attributable the symptoms are not attributable to COVID-19.
Absolutely. And good luck getting a test. I mean, I'm finding everyone's struggling to get a test. I know they're flying off, the home tests are flying off the shelf as quick as the stores open. But that's a difficult thing to do, get into the doctor and get a test.
Yeah, the home tests have disappeared. As everybody who's been on these programs knows, I've got kids kind of scattered throughout the U.S. My daughter up in New York, where she says everyone has COVID. She said that you can't find a test anywhere. I do understand, and from experience, I know here in St. Louis that some of the CVS and Walgreens that are getting tests in, and there's news on social media about who has them, and then the tests are gone almost instantly.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, I want to get into the poll question here real quick to get things started off for this year. As you and I are talking about programming, looking to beef up the program, and we're going to talk more about that in future episodes. But this question might help us in that. And the question is, other than COVID, what is your top priority for Q1 of 2022? And in the poll, you'll have the answers of options: hourly staffing, professional staffing, culture, compliance, compensation, professional development, or other. So that's the poll question. Producer Nick, anything new in how to take the poll that listeners need to know about?
Well, I would say that we're already professionals at this because you guys have great participation. So right where you go to ask your question, typically above that is going to be a little check mark. And if you hover over the check mark, it'll say survey. So if you go there, you click on survey, you can fill it out, and then we'll get the answers here. We'll show them later in the program.
Great. Thank you, Nick. So that's the poll question. Other than COVID, what is your top priorities for 2022 first quarter, right? Next 3-4 months. That's what we're looking at. And we appreciate some feedback on that. We'll share those results. I have an opinion what I think they're going to be, but we will see. Okay, Bert, I'm sorry. We'll get back to that now. Yeah, so that's a big change with the COVID quarantine. Let's skip and talk a little bit about St. Louis. What's happening in St. Louis? We have a large listening population out of the St. Louis County and region. And there's been another mask mandate and now a lawsuit filed on that.
Yeah, it's the saga continues here in the county. I believe 2 days ago, the County of St. Louis, the county council voted 4-3 in favor of a new mask mandate that went into effect, I believe, yesterday. Also yesterday, the state's attorney general filed suit to stop that mask mandate. And from a more libertarian perspective that likes to believe that government is not necessarily the answer to everything, it just burns me up because we just have government fighting each other. and here we are as taxpayers paying for all of that. But I digress for a minute. The bottom line is that the county of St. Louis says there is a mask mandate in effect, an indoor mask mandate in effect right now, and I think we'll get some news from the courts fairly quickly on whether that mask mandate is actually valid or not. The state's attorney general is taking the position that the mask mandate is not valid. Just by way of sort of completing the thoughts there, last month in December, about mid-December, the city aldermen, Board of Aldermen, renewed the city's mask mandate. So according to the city of St. Louis, there is still a mask mandate in place. I don't believe the state's attorney general has sued over that one, because that one I don't believe violates the order that the state of Missouri put in place about the middle of last year, or the new law that the state of Missouri put in place last year. So I think right now where we sit, the mask mandate is in effect in the city of St. Louis. According to the county council, it's in effect in the county of St. Louis, but according to the state's attorney general, that is an illegal order. So we'll have to have the courts resolve that one as well.
Yeah, like you say, I mean, let's just have more infighting. That will help the problem.
Yes.
Never mind on that. All right, so that was effective as of 8:30 yesterday. So people are asking, do I not? And my response is, until it's resolved in the court, I would follow the mandate that's been issued. Would you have advice differently than that?
Well, I as a lawyer, I would never tell somebody to violate the law. The question here is what is the law? And
Right.
so that becomes a difficult question. I think what I would tend to do is probably continue to follow CDC guidance right now, and on masking, and that is that people who are vaccinated don't necessarily have to wear masks indoors. People who are unvaccinated should be masking up indoors, and then, depending on how you feel about how this is going to shake out with the county of St. Louis, I'd probably base my decision on following the county council's guidance on whether you think it's ultimately going to be upheld. But at a minimum, I would continue to follow CDC guidance.
Yeah, and I think the other part of that is, before someone brings it up, I mean, you have the right as an employer to do what you choose to require. If you did say, I do want to require that, there's nothing that prevents you from doing so.
That is absolutely correct. And I think we're still seeing that. In part of the frustration for everyone is just kind of the haphazard nature of everything related to COVID these days. You've got some businesses that are saying mask up. You've got other businesses that aren't requiring masking, and it's the lack of consistency, I think, that creates a lot of problems for people.
Yeah. Okay. Let's move on and let's discuss what's going on with the OSHA emergency temporary standard in the court system. Where does that lie today?
Yeah, so I think tomorrow is going to be a big day on that. The Supreme Court, Justice Kavanaugh is the lead justice on that issue. And prior to the holidays, he set a briefing schedule, and that new OSHA requirement is supposed to go into effect next Monday on the 10th. And interestingly, Kavanaugh previously indicated that you might expect a ruling from the Supreme Court tomorrow, the 7th. So depending on what the court does, it's either going to not leave employers much time to comply with at least the first part of the OSHA ETS, or the OSHA ETS is going to get tossed out the window. You had the bulk of the states file briefing against the OSHA ETS. So most states, again, we continue with the infighting. You've got the state governments fighting the federal governments or federal government. And, again, we pay for all of this. And the uncertainty that creates. We just need something from the Supreme Court to finally say, yes, the OSHA ETS is going into effect or it's not.
Right.
And like I said, we expect to get a ruling tomorrow. The states, like I said, the bulk of the states have opposed it. Interestingly, through briefing and some of the other cases throughout the country, you've got the unions, believe it or not, actually in favor of the OSHA ETS. And so the unions have really sided with the Biden administration on this. And people have heard my speculation before as a management side labor and employment lawyer that the unions are doing all they can to curry favor with the Biden administration in the hopes that the Biden administration.
Think they're going to want something in return, do you, Bert?
Yeah, go look up the PRO Act, PRO Act, and anyone who has curiosity as to what the unions are hoping to get from the Biden administration in return, just look up the PRO Act. We'll talk about it on one of these programs a little bit because it is pretty shocking. But that's what the unions are seeking in return from the Biden administration. So politics are at play everywhere.
Yeah, no, it's all at play. Sometimes we're just all pawns in the game. But stay in tune with us and we will keep you up to date. And if things change and come out tomorrow, we'll make sure to get some communication out to our listeners on that for sure.
Yeah, and Phil, I'll also take one quick second. I don't have the links, but I think they're up on your website. A lot of the listeners have taken advantage of Ogletree's template packages leading up to COVID, up to the anticipation that the ETS is going to go into effect. Just remember that on Monday, the employers are supposed to, if the ETS is upheld, employers are supposed to have a policy in place and also be working on, or at least have an idea of what their mechanisms are going to look like for testing, if the testing is going to be an option, for collecting data on vaccine and maintaining and storing that data. Monday is the day that most of this is supposed to be put in place. If you haven't done it yet, the Ogletree templates are a really good place for you to start. I think we have until the first week of February for the testing and the testing requirements for the testing to actually start. So we do have a little bit of time for that. But again, we should know more tomorrow, and we'll do our best to get an alert out along with the rest of the media and other publications that are out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I've had several questions. How do they get that file, download it, and use it? And I think it's a great document. It's awesome that your firm is making that available at such an affordable price. And I know if I had more than 100 employees, I'd purchase it myself and make sure that I follow it. It's a very, very good document. Well done to the Ogletree team.
Thanks, Phil. And yeah, the cost of recreating that for on an individual employer basis would be significantly higher than what the templates are going for. Now, I do think you bring up a really good point, and as a reminder for everybody, remember this OSHA ETS is for employers that the OSHA considers to be large employers, and that is employers of 100 or more employees. So the smaller employers, the smaller employers do not need to worry at this point about compliance with the OSHA ETS.
Great. Okay, Nick, how's the poll coming along, Nick? Any results that we want to share real quick?
Yeah, so we have, looks like the number one response is hourly staffing. So we have hourly staffing right there. And we have number two, I believe, is professional development. And coming in third is culture. Yeah. Isn't it funny how one of those affects the other, right? Your professional development affects the culture, affects your staffing needs from a retention and, the ability to attract and retain. Those are definitely all linked. So yeah, that's good. If you have more input, we'd love to have it. We'll continue to share that with you one more time before we leave if the results change. Bert, I want to continue with what you were just saying. I want to talk a little bit about the temporary standard and a question that Shelley had submitted.
Let me read her question. It's if the OSHA, geez, my screen's popping up here. If the OSHA ETS is upheld by the Supreme Court, we plan to do weekly testing instead of mandating vaccine. Can a company department manager / supervisor or supervise the COVID weekly testing, or does it have to be supervised by a clinician? Excuse me. I got a little COVID fog. I got my booster yesterday, and it's definitely affected me. Are there requirements such as training needed for the department manager to administer the testing? Let's just chat about that for a moment, because this is going to be something many employers are going to deal with.
Yeah, employers are struggling with this, and OSHA ETS unfortunately doesn't provide great guidance on this. But let me read a little something here that I've drafted that should help employers sort of hone in on what needs to be done. And so basically, employees may receive testing through the company itself, or employees may obtain COVID-19 tests through a medical provider or a lab of their choice, and then submit copies of the negative test results to someone at the company. And what I've been encouraging, and what my firm has been encouraging employers to do, is basically say something along the lines that for purposes of the COVID-19 policy, again, that you must have in place to comply with the OSHA ETS, COVID-19 tests include any test that has been cleared, approved, or authorized by the FDA to detect current infection of the COVID-19 virus, provided it meets a. First would be that the test is administered in accordance with the authorized instructions. And so if there is going to be some sort of a self-test or at home or at work test, that it has to be administered in accordance with those instructions. And then secondly, and this is very important, the test cannot be both self-administered and self-read unless that is observed by a designated company representative or an authorized telehealth proctor. So what that means, Phil, and I know you're chomping at the bit to jump in here. What that means, for example, is that home test kits or other self-test kits are not acceptable unless those are witnessed by a designated company representative or proctored through an appropriate telehealth service. And this is what we have been able to glean from the OSHA ETS that was published. And I think if employers follow this for the testing, that they will be in compliance.
Yeah, and that I'm already imagining as I'm smiling as you're talking about that, all the challenges. I can only imagine, you have several hundred people coming in, and a percent of them are going to need to be tested, and you got, a supervisor or a manager sitting there administering tests on employees and sticking a swab up their nose. And he likes me, he doesn't like me, she likes me, she doesn't like me, he's stuck it further than he needed to, left it in longer, he caused me this. I can only imagine the problems that come with that. So I do like the idea of maybe self-swab the test, and then supervision observes that and then reads the results. Sounds like that's an option. I can only imagine your phone's going to start ringing when people start sticking swabs up their nose.
Yeah, I think that if people are employers are trying to comply with the OSHA ETS, and while at the same time that they're doing that, they're sticking swabs up people's noses, I could see that there's going to be a lot more OSHA issues coming down the pike if the employer is doing that. So I do agree. I think the best process there would be that the employees are allowed to self-administer the tests under the guidance of someone from the company or a medical professional or proctored by a telehealth official.
Right. Yeah, I think that's going to be the organizational challenge is how to do that and do it in a way that you keep the right employee relation and so forth that comes from that. But nevertheless, that is an option, though, is to have them do it themselves. And that's if the employer chooses to purchase the test or charge the employee. They can do either one.
Yeah, we need to be a little bit careful of state laws, also of the anti-discrimination laws for people who may not be able to be vaccinated for religious or health-related reasons. But the OSHA ETS does specifically authorize the employer to cost shift the cost of testing to the employees themselves. And remember that that employees, the testing option, and it is an option that employers allow for testing, and basically it's the employees who are not yet fully vaccinated have to provide a proof of a negative COVID-19 test at least once every 7 days while they work in the workplace.
Okay.
If they have not reported to the workplace in the preceding 7 days, they must provide proof of a negative COVID-19 test taken within 7 days prior to returning to the workplace. And again, to the extent the health insurance does not fully cover the cost of testing, employees could be responsible. The employer has the ability to shift that cost and make the employees responsible for the cost of obtaining those negative tests every 7 days, again, unless state law requires otherwise.
Yeah. Nick, do we have an update? I think some of the numbers are changing.
Yep, for the most part, we're the same as far as hourly staffing is number one. Culture has caught up to, what do we have over here? Professional development. So, and then when we talk about what's in third, we have compensation. Shortly behind that is professional staffing, and then compliance.
All right. And we're getting a chat question. If I can give a little clarity for, they're asking where they can get the templates that you were referring to provided by Ogletree. One of the best ways to do that is to reach out to Bert himself by email. They're available through Ogletree. We do have a link on our morning briefing site that takes you there, but I just want to let you know of one for sure way is to reach out to Bert, and he'll take care of that. Bert, is there anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would just say the best would be by email at Burton, BURTON.Garland, GARLAND at Ogletree.com.
Yeah. All right. And we are getting some feedback around organizations that are designed to help with this testing and administration. We're not going to have enough time to get into that today, but we will share some of that information next week as it has been coming in the chat line as well. So
Bill, there's a question that just popped up in the chat also that Sean says, so if we have under 100 employees, we do not need to have a COVID policy in place. And Sean, I would tell you that if you are a standalone company, you're not part of a larger group, then yes, the answer is as simple as that. If you're under 100 employees, you do not need to have a COVID policy in place to comply with the OSHA ETS. You still may want to have a COVID policy in place. That's something for your company to decide. But unless you're part of a larger holding company and you're concerned about being integrated with those other holdings, if you are under 100, you're a standalone company, you do not need to have a COVID policy in place.
Yeah, and I'm familiar with Sean and their business, and in your case, Sean, as long as you're under 100, you're fine at your location. They're a single location, single company. Yep. All right, Bert, we have just a minute left. We have a few other questions here. I'm going to try and throw you an easy one. In lieu of the recent Omicron surge, will the OSHA emergency temporary standard, the mandate, eventually filter down to employers under 100? I think they're looking for your opinion, or if you've heard anything on that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Initially, way back last year, a couple months ago, there was some talk that there was a substantial likelihood that this would filter down to employers of fewer than 100 employees after it got put in place for the larger employers. I think in light of the Biden administration's talk or comments from a couple of weeks ago about that there's not going to be a federal solution to getting COVID under control. I guess at this point, I'd be a little bit surprised if that continues to filter down. But of course, all of this is somewhat speculative, and I think we will learn more tomorrow when we hear from the Supreme Court. If the Supreme Court says that this OSHA ETS is not in effect, and I'm not even going to speculate as to what the Supreme Court's going to do with this. If the Supreme Court says it's not in effect, I think that kills the OSHA ETS for large employers, and there's no chance of it filtering down to smaller employers. If the Supreme Court upholds this, then I think there is a chance it could filter down.
Yep. All right. That wraps up the program for today. I do want to remind everyone the new reasonable suspicion training program that we talked about last year will be available on demand come Monday morning. When you wake up, you can check it out by going to AIM University or visiting the AIM website and following the process from there under training and development. We will be back on the air next Thursday, if not sooner, unless there's some breaking news. Bert, it is great to see you again. I look forward to working with you in 2022. Nick, thank you very much, and welcome back to the morning briefing. Bye-bye.
Story. Promote your products. Communicate with your employees and customers vividly, dynamically, and powerfully. Whether it's a company video, recruitment video, online training, or live meeting, Feature Group can help you from scripting to highly polished finished production. Whether it's live or on demand, we have the skills and equipment to wow your audience and drive your message home. Feature Group USA, the one-stop shop for all your broadcasting needs.